Jahangir, to you, what have you made of the events of the last 24 hours? You've been a close watcher of India and of the Reserve Bank.
Look, I mean, whenever a country, has a abrupt resignation of a central bank governor, it's not very good for the markets. It's not good for policy certainty. I think that's exactly the way it's played out, that the risk premium on India's policies and the direction of policies have just gone up. And I think that it will depend very much on the set of decisions that the government takes in the next few days or weeks to basically bring down that risk premium. If they do it successfully, then this could just be a temporary, hit on sentiments regarding India. If they don't, then clearly this will have a much longer-term effect than what the government or the markets might think.
Jahangir, as things stand right now, given the information available to us of the last month or so, and now what has happened, is the benefit of doubt being certainly given to the Reserve Bank of India right now? Is everyone saying that the Indian government is meddling with the affairs of the Reserve Bank of India? Is that the broad thinking?
I think, it's not that as clear-cut as that. I think if you look at the last policy review, which, had the full, the Reserve Bank governors and everybody, and the deputy governors, etc., the Monetary Policy Committee, which, clearly is something that, hasn't been, that influenced that much by any of the stuff that is happening. If you look at that policy provides a significant amount of support, both in terms of providing liquidity to the markets, as well as providing a significant amounts of support to the budget per se. If you look at the commitments that the RBI has made to do bond purchases, it's almost like 75-80% of this entire year's budget. If you add to that what the RBI might actually transfer in terms of profits, that takes that percentage much higher. So in terms of, providing the kind of things that the government had argued for, I think the RBI has provided that. So whether the RBI governor remains or goes or doesn't go, I don't think that really changes that much what the RBI has actually promised. What I think really is being questioned is that does this raise the credibility? Does this raise questions about where RBI independence lies, not just in monetary policy but outside of monetary policy, and just in the sense of where exactly is policies for between now and, let's say, the budget, which is the next big event, where is it going?
Jahangir, as everyone has said, the events of the next few days, perhaps weeks, will be absolutely critical in forming a perhaps more informed opinion about what has happened and what its implications are. What would be an absolute out-and-out negative for you if you see something like SME lending, not curbs, but SME lending rules being loosened up significantly, or if you see a committee for the economic capital framework, which is very tilted towards the government? Would those be red flags? What else would be red flags to you?
So, I mean, I have a somewhat of a different view from most other people in the market. I don't really think that the capital issue is that big of an issue. A central bank doesn't require the kind of capital that RBI has. That is, almost everyone will agree to that. I'm not even sure whether the central bank needs any capital. It is not a commercial bank. Its liability side is not contingent on how much capital it has. But it needs to work out an arrangement and a more permanent arrangement with the government in terms of how the government actually takes into account losses that the RBI makes. Now, those are questions that, should be addressed and will be probably addressed over the medium term. So I'm not really that concerned about the government saying, look, you have a lot of capital and this capital needs to be used for other purposes. The question is, what is the purpose for which that capital is going to get used? The capital of the Reserve Bank of India is an asset of the government. If the government swaps that asset with some other asset, then I think it's fine. But if the government takes that asset and starts funding current expenditure, then clearly there's a problem with that. But those are details that we don't know very much about. So I'm not really that bothered about this capital question. I think too much is being made out of that. I'm much more concerned about the parts about providing separate windows for SMEs or providing separate windows for non-bank financials or extending a regulatory forbearance. I think that would be much more disconcerting to me rather than just the capital part of the debate.
No, absolutely, because that will then have a bearing on how the economy sort of moves forward. Jahangir, last question. One, I heard your comments on the reserves, but would it also be important, whatever the decision is, to see whether it's consultative or not, or to the extent that it is consultative? And, the final question to you is, how should we expect investors to react? We don't have any sort of interim arrangement being put in place yet, or obviously the announcement of a new governor. Although I would have assumed that before market open, there should have been some statement. I've been repeating that since the morning.
So look, as I said, you already have a direction of policies by the RBI, the last monetary policy review. I think that should be taken as the default at this point in time. And the market has enough from the last policy review to basically make up its mind as to what direction policies will go in the interim till, let's say, the next policy review. The question is what happens in the next policy review and what happens in the board meetings in between now and the next policy review in February. Again, those will depend upon who the chairman of the board, i.e. who the new governor is. But I think in terms of just, liquidity provision or the direction of monetary policy, etc., I think more or less people should just look at the last policy review and say, look, that's the default. That's how things are going to pan out for the next 2-3 months. And I would say that the market needs to focus much more on something more important, which is the February budget.